Good morning, Eden. Oh, morning, Elliot. So, welcome to our inaugural premier Semicha program. I'm very, very excited to be doing this. I'm glad you're all joining, and I hope you're as excited for this as I am. So, we're going to begin just like a very broad strokes introductions, so we know what's going on, we know where we are, and what we hope to achieve. So, first and foremost, you should know that we're doing something the Rebbe asked. That's number one. It was one of the Rebbe's ideas that a young man before he gets married should learn smicha, should get smicha. And the basic idea of getting smicha, there's a few different levels of, sorry? We're a bit late on that. It's never too late, but I'm just making the point. They wanted everybody to get smicha. So what's the point of that? What do they want out of this? So the first thing is that a person should obviously know practical halacha, know how to run a Jewish home, which it's important to explain what that means. We're not necessarily learning the laws of kashrus. Not necessarily what this is. For example, we're not going to be learning the halachas of what is kosher and what isn't kosher, which animals are kosher, what foods are kosher, which foods are not kosher, which products are kosher and not kosher. It's not going to be a discussion of that, right? For example, we're not learning the laws of shchita, the laws of treifa, right? The laws of what makes an animal kosher or not kosher. We're not learning any of that. What we are learning is the laws of a kosher kitchen, which is not the same thing. In a kosher kitchen, you already know that the products you're bringing in are kosher. And the question is, when these products that are in your house come in contact with things that aren't kosher, or milk and meat come in contact with each other, then you have a problem. Then you have to know what to do, right? But the milk and meat that's in your house is already kosher. So the laws of kosher milk we're not learning. The laws of kosher meat we're not learning, right? We're going to learn the laws of what happens when meat and milk interact and how you handle that, right? So again, it's not the laws of kosher. It's more the laws of kosher kitchen. That's number one. So it's very practical in that sense. You're running a home and you have to know what to do. That's number one. And number two is as well, sorry?
I usually just call you.
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that in a second about what that means, what that is. So that's number one. Number two is another thing to understand is that in general, and this is, I think, to your point, in general, halacha is built on a lot of principles. There are certain building blocks that make up the halachas. There are a bunch of rules and principles that are applied in different stories. This is true of halacha in general, and specifically when it comes to the laws of kosher. So, for example, if you learn the laws of the morning brachas or shachris, you're gonna have a lot of do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do this. Stand up, sit down, don't talk. Say these words, answer amen, don't answer amen. A lot of do's and don'ts. Even Shabbos, you'll also have a lot of that. This you may do, this you may not do. This you can do, this you can't do. This is when it's allowed, this is when it's not allowed, and so on and so forth. When it comes to the laws of kosher, what I'm about to tell you is true of all of halacha, but it's especially true of the laws of what we're learning here. Is it's very much principle oriented. So there's going to be a bunch of principles that we're going to learn, and at the end, hopefully, even if we're not proficient in all the halachas, we are going to be proficient in understanding what these principles are. So let's say, for example, there's a principle chanan, means ches nun nun, that stands for chaticha nasa nevela, which means if, for example, there's a piece of meat, right, and a little bit of milk falls on the piece of meat. So now it's not just that there's a little bit of milk that makes a little bit of the meat not kosher, but the entire meat becomes a piece of meat that's not kosher. And therefore, if this piece of meat were to fall into a soup pot, I need to have 60 times, not the amount of milk, but 60 times the amount of the entire piece of meat. Because the whole piece of meat itself became a non-kosher item. You follow that? That's one principle, for example. And then there's other principles. Principle of nat bar nat, nice and tam bar nice and tam, which is the flavor didn't go in directly in contact with each other, but came indirectly. So meat was absorbed into a pot and then later absorbed into something else. So it's 2 times removed till the flavor gets to. So when do you apply that principle? There's a principle of nice and tam levgan, which is there's non-kosher flavor added to this, but the non-kosher flavor is a negative non-kosher flavor, not a positive one. So let's say the meat is spoiled. So the spoiled meat doesn't add any positive flavor to the milk mixture. It has a negative flavor that has the impact on the halacha. So it's going to be a lot of principle-based stuff. So it's not going to be so much do, don't do, don't do, don't. It's going to be principle-based stuff. A lot of, and every section that we're going to be learning, every unit that we're going to be learning is going to focus on another principle, which is why we're not going to be going in order. We're not going to be going in order of the numbers. For example, we're going to be starting this week with 105, even though Semicha is starting from way earlier. It's like Zion or even earlier, Malicha. but because we're going by principles. And the Laman Yilmadu scholars have set it up in such a way that you get like the building blocks as you go along. So we're going to be learning these principles, which gets to the point that I think that David was saying, is that it's not necessarily the case that when you're done with the Semicha, you know the answer to every question. Not necessarily, and it's not the objective either. But you will know what a question is and how to ask it and how to apply it. Because you're going to see a situation and be like, oh, okay, the last time I used this pot was a day ago. There's sharp food in there. It's only a tiny amount of milk. Okay, so I have 3 different principles written down that I'm relying on. Now I know how to ask the question and I know what to look for. I know how to think about the problem, even if I don't necessarily have the answer right away. So you know how to ask a shaila is 90% of what we're doing, not even knowing how to answer the shaila. Yeah, we clear so far? Yeah. Which leads to the next point, which is, it's very hard for me to imagine that everyone was expecting every wanted, like every Lavachi and Lamanchi run around calling himself rabbi. I don't think that was the point. The point was not to run a kitchen and to know how to apply the halachas when necessary, to understand the principles of halacha, so you can run a kosher home. Just that's kind of the idea. And I'm actually very grateful that there are some of the students here who told me that they feel uncomfortable learning during this micha because they don't feel like they deserve the title rabbi. So you know what, you're exactly the perfect candidate to be here. If you're running because you want to get a title, maybe that's not the best motivation to learn Torah. Learning Torah is Hashem's Torah, and Hashem wants us to know what to do. And the titles come automatically, right? But it's not the objective, it's not the goal to get some sort of title. Even though, of course, conversely, the uniqueness and beauty of learning smicha is that there's a beginning, middle, of end. Sometimes you're learning, let's say, a weekly share in Gemara. You're just going and going and going and going. But here, there's a unit, there's a beginning, there's a middle of an end, there's a certificate at the end. So you have like a real complete accomplishment, which is definitely a very, very good feeling in your learning and creates a good consistency in the learning. But at the end, it's not looking for titles necessarily. Okay, so that's a broad strokes introduction. Smicha is divided into 3 categories: Taaruvos, Basar B'cholov, and Melicha. Taaruvos, which is where we're going to start with. We're going to start from 105, which is the middle of Taaruvos. Taaruvos means mixtures. We're not ready to get to the text just yet, but just explaining where we are. Taaruvos literally means mixtures. Sometimes it's referred to as Isser v'Heter, which means that which is forbidden, Isser, and Heter, that which is permitted. Now, this is important because, for example, milk and meat, milk is kosher and meat is kosher. They only become non-kosher when they're in contact with each other. So that has one set of laws, how you would treat 2 kosher items that only become non-kosher when they're in contact. And in what manner does that contact make it not kosher? But then there's other kind of mixtures. If you have non-kosher meat that get mixed up with kosher meat, that's the first set of halachas, Taaruvos, or non-kosher fat that gets mixed up with oil, or any non-kosher food that get mixed in with kosher food. Those are the principles of Taaruvos. Now, those will actually happen in your kitchen much less often, because again, non-kosher products aren't coming into your kitchen. But we're still going to be learning these things because the principles of mixtures are relevant to everything, right? The principles of how we treat mixtures, and when mixtures become a problem, that's going to be applied even to milk and meat. It's going to be applied to everything, right? And this is the next thing, which is very important to understand. This is like perhaps the most important thing as we go forward into the beginning, which is when it comes to non-kosher coming in contact with kosher, Taaruvos mixtures, the essence of the prohibition is defined by whether the kosher item absorbed any of the non-kosher flavor. That's what it comes down to. So if you took, I'm not recommending you do this, but hypothetically, if you took a dried piece of non-kosher steak and you took a dried piece of kosher steak and you put the 2 together, just holding them together like that when they're perfectly cold, no flavor got transferred from the non-kosher meat into the kosher meat. So at best, all you need to do is rinse off the kosher meat, because maybe if there's a little fattiness to the non-kosher meat and it got stuck to the kosher meat, so you want to rinse it off. We'll get to those halachas actually coming soon, but let's just say, but there's no flavor transfer. So it doesn't like magically go from one to the other. In other words, it's very scientific almost. It's very scientific in how do we measure the movement of flavor from one thing to the next. So if you want to go to like the highest form or the worst form of flavor transfer, would be cooking. If you take 2 pieces of meat, kosher and non-kosher, and you boil them in a pot, then all of them have the flavor of all of them because they're boiled together in one mixture, one stew. Right? So that was bishul. Bishul, cooking, is the highest form of flavor transfer. Then you have lesser levels. What if they're grilled together? Does flavor transfer when they're grilled together? What if they're on a spit and now there's contact while they're getting heated from a grill? Is there contact there, and to what degree is that contact? What if they're, which is what we're going to first address in 105, is what if they are pickled together? What level of transfer is there? If they're salted together, what kind of transfer level is there? Right? That's what it's all going to come down to, is trying to understand to what degree and in what circumstances does flavor move from one item to the next. It'll change. Is the meat fattier, not fattier? Is it a slice of bread, or is it oily kugel? That'll make a very big difference as to how flavor transfers. Right? We're following? Is there liquid in the mixture? Is there not liquid in the mixture? All this stuff is going to make a big difference. So again, these are like the principles you have to be thinking about when you're trying to determine a scenario of whether something's kosher or not. Okay, was there liquid? Wasn't there liquid? How long did it cook for? How long did it sit together for? All of that's going to be taken into consideration. But it's important to understand that's what this section Taaruvos means, is mixture. Because we're trying to determine to what degree and in what manner does flavor transfer from one item to another to determine whether or not the kosher item absorbs anything not kosher. And that will end up translating to how we understand the mixtures of milk and meat as well. Because when milk and meat mix, it's also a question of did the flavor transfer. So even though the cases of Taaruvos are not going to happen to us so often, because the products in our house are kosher, so very rarely are you going to have an unkosher product fall into your kosher soup. But the principles of how flavor transfers will apply to when milk and meat come in contact, because the principles are all interlinked. So those are your first two units, Taaruvos, basar b'chalav, and then the third unit is melicha. Right? Basar b'chalav means milk and meat. Melicha, the third unit, is salting. Salting also is relevant, even though none of us are going to be salting meat because we all buy our meat is already salted. Right? The meat we buy is already salted to extract the blood. Right? So it's already done by the butchers. So my grandma was telling me that she grew up, she used to do this in her family. They used to kosher the kitchen themselves, buy a live chicken. She was growing up, you buy a live chicken, and you buy a fat one, hopefully. Buy it on Wednesday. Thursday, you spend your time stuffing it with bread so it's fatter. And then you take it to the sheichet on Thursday, whatever, get it shechted, and then you bring it home and mommy prepares it in the kitchen. Literally prepares it, and including preparing it is kosherizing it, which means salting it and checking to make sure the lungs aren't punctured and whatnot. And if there's ever a problem, mommy says, Tukla, please take the lung and go to the Rav and ask if there's a problem. So the little 8-year-old girl takes a lung from a chicken, runs to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, my mother said that there might be a problem with the chicken. The rabbi looks at it and says, oh, there's no puncture. It's okay. It's kosher. Go enjoy your chicken for Shabbos, right? That was the whole part of Yiddishkeit. She was telling me, she was like bemoaning that we are growing up missing a whole part of Yiddishkeit because they're buying already pre-kosherized meat, right? So anyway, but we're going to be learning the laws of melicha, the laws of salting meat, and it's going to become relevant because, again, in the principles of salting meat comes the question of how is flavor extracted and how it gets transferred to something else. If you salt two pieces of meat next to each other, and one exfoliates meat, blood, is the other one absorbing it or not? So the same principles, a lot of the same principles of absorption and flavor transfer is going to come up in melicha, and that's why we're going to be learning that as well. Okay, so that's a general overview of what we're going to be learning over the next year and what we're hoping to achieve, and what are the things to keep in mind. Clear so far before we go forward? Yeah. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Did you get a photo? Did you take a picture?
We did not, Elliot, but thank you for.
Elliot's thinking of MCC promotion.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to get to the question of everybody's schedule, because I know everybody has different schedules, and maybe the best thing I'll do is I'll post on the, I'm going to post a poll on the group. But I'm thinking, as of now, I'm thinking like this. Sunday morning after davening, we're going to do this year. It's going to be an introduction for the content, which I'll do in a second. I want to do the introduction to the content we're going to be learning this week. I want to talk about that in a minute. That's going to be Sunday morning. And then throughout the week, I'm going to be here every day after davening. Anyway, I'm here every day after davening. So the best time to learn with a chavruta, and if you want me to be around to answer questions, would be after davening. Right after davening, 8 to 9 o'clock or however long. I'm here anyway till about, I sit and learn here anyway till about 12 anyway. So I'm here to answer questions all the way till 12 o'clock. So that's your best time if you want to have a chavruta where I'm around to answer questions. That would be the best time. Is any day after davening from basically any time after davening, essentially. But I know there's quite a few that want evening option. So I think this is what I'm thinking right now is to make keeping the morning as is. I'm available. I'm here, but also to have the option in the evening at least twice a week. I think Wednesday and Thursday evenings is going to be the way to go. Maybe Wednesday at class, Thursday chavruta, or the other way around. And the class in the evening will be similar to the class that I intended to do on Friday. So if there's guys who want to have Dafka Friday morning class, we'll stick to that schedule. So I'm going to post it on the group polls. I just want to just let you know what I'm thinking. And the class Friday morning is going to be a review of what we learned in the week. Same with the Thursday night class will be a review of what we learned in the week, plus added practical elements that may not be so obvious in the text. Some practical elements added as well. So if we do this correctly, we're going through the content multiple times, which is good to get it done well. In the introduction, learn it on our own, and even learning it on your own, we're going to be doing it a few times. I'll explain in a minute. And then on Friday, the review, or Thursday, the review. So I'm going to put a poll out to see which classes everybody prefers. But I think this is going to happen. I'm going to be here every day after davening, class Sunday, class Friday, and then I'll be here Wednesday night and Thursday night, and class one of the two. I think it's going to happen anyway, and you'll choose which ones you want to be at and when your chavruta works out for you. Okay, that's as far as the order goes. Okay, recommendation also, in terms of the learning itself. So you have, for every unit, you have 3 booklets. For Taaruvos, so you should have 9 booklets basically in front of you. 3 for Taaruvos, 3 for Basar B'chalav, and 3 for Melicha.
Are you sure about that? For
Looks like there's 2 for each.
Yeah.
There's 2 for which one?
Just for everything.
No, because I have, for example, I have, okay, one is I have 2 Taaruvos Shulchan Aruch,
Yeah.
right? Then I have Taaruvos visualization,
Yeah.
and then I have Taaruvos summary. That's 3 for
Taruba summary is missing.
Taaruvos summary should be around.
That's not the
So
bottom.
Basar
You're
B'chalav,
right, I see Basar B'chalav.
Basar B'chalav, the same thing?
No, this should
He
be
accidentally
Taaruvos.
gave you 2 sets of
Okay,
Basar B'chalav.
We're missing Taaruvos summary.
He gave you 2 sets of Basar B'chalav.
Summary, but didn't give me
Yeah.
Taaruvos summaries. Yeah,
Yes.
that's not good. Taaruvos summaries are very important. You don't have them?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to ask them to give me a PDF, and they'll give me the booklet whenever I can.
I
They're not in there, you sure?
I'm sure because look, there's 2 sets of Basar B'chalav summaries.
Uh-huh.
2 different sets. So I think he.
I see. Okay, I'm going to fix that up.
Misprint. Now we're missing.
No, maybe the inside is different.
And then that would be good. Sorry, you're missing summaries of Taaruvos.
No,
it's the just
And Basar B'chalav Shulchan Aruch you don't have either.
Yeah.
Mhm. The Shulchan, what's the other box with the Shulchan Aruch doesn't have Basar B'chalav Shulchan Aruch? For now, we need Taaruvos, Kufay, Siman Kufay, which is 105. Basar B'chalav booklets aren't there?
No.
No, okay, that's not good. We'll have to get that fixed up.
Not here, maybe it's there.
Okay, so I'm going to get the PDF right away, and then we'll get the booklet as soon as we can. But my recommendation is going to be like this. I went through these booklets already, just at least on Kofei, on what we're learning this week, just to get an idea of how they operate these books.
Oh.
So my suggestion is going to be to read the summary first, then the Shulchan Aruch. If you read the Shulchan Aruch on its own, there's a lot you're going to be missing that may not be clear. So my recommendation would be to read the summaries first. Then, actually, to begin with, there's a the beginning of the summaries. There's a 2-page introduction to Hilchos Taaruvos.
Let me see. We don't have this on. Well,
Never. Anyway, my recommendation is first the summary, then the text, and then the visualization will give you like a good chazara, good review. That would be my recommendation. Summary, text, and then the visualization in terms of learning. And the other thing I'm going to recommend is, so you have your notebooks,
no, I'm missing this one.
the Malika visualization. Okay, we'll have to go through all this after and figure out what we're missing, and then fix everything up.
So you said you want us to have it in order of Shulchan Aruch, summary and visualization?
Yeah, so my recommendation would be to learn the summary first, read the summaries first, then the text, and then the visualization.
He has it now.
Yeah, I got it.
That would be my recommendation, just based on how I read these, how I read the texts here.
Can I see your 2 Shulchan Aruchs? Because I
Okay.
realized there's a 3rd one.
So we're missing Basar B'chalav Shulchan.
Shulchan Aruch and missing summaries of Taaruvos.
69.
Okay.
Is there gonna be a Basar B'chalav for this one?
There should be, it's missing.
So
Yeah.
it is one I'm missing.
Well, we're starting with Taaruvos anyway, but we need to get the summaries for Taaruvos. I'm gonna get the PDF right away so we can start learning.
Yeah.
Oh, the Basar B'chalav Shulchan Aruch we have. Okay, but not the Taaruvos summaries that we're missing. Okay, so that's the recommendation. Summaries first, then the text, then the visualization. Okay.
Summaries are first, then-
Another recommendation. Because again, the 2 things to bear in mind. Because again, it's very principle oriented. It's going to be very based on building principles.
Summaries?
And my recommendation is that your note. Sorry?
Okay.
So my recommendation is for taking notes is like this. take notes divided by terminologies, right? So one way to take notes is like take a note of every single thing you learn. That can be very redundant to the text that you have in front of you. A good way to keep the summaries is give yourself a title. Let's say the principle. So right now, the first principle we're going to learn is kavosh k'mavoshel, right? Which is we're going to learn, and I'll explain in a minute what that is. That's what we're going to learn. It's the first principle.
Is all these terms not knowing the easy make it possible?
Okay, so I was going to address that in a second. So that's why your notes, my recommendation would be that your notes should be almost like a dictionary for the terms, because these terms are going to be repeated a bunch of times. So don't get stressed out when you see like 3 different terms, like, oh my gosh, I know what these things are. I have to remember all these terms. They're all going to come back. Every single term you come in contact with is going to come back again and again and again, because again, you're constantly going to be applying these principles to every situation. So if you have like in your dictionary terminologies, then as you add more details to the terminology, you can go back to that terminology and add a detail. So you're going to build more and more picture to each of your terminologies, and that will like help you with like your building blocks of understanding the halacha. Because every time you come across that terminology and you add a detail, okay, so I can go back to my dictionary and add this detail about when this principle applies or when it doesn't apply, right? And then you'll start to get the vernacular because you're constantly reviewing the same principles again and again. So that would be my recommendation in terms of note taking, is to create like a dictionary for yourself almost of the terms that are constantly going to be reviewed and come up again and again.
Is the subject matter based on modules? Like we learn Taaruvos and then we pass the tests on it and then go to the next module?
So you look at the syllabus. They divided it based on principles rather than simonim. So let's take for example.
So we might be going into everything.
So yeah. So I'm looking at the syllabus right now just to make the point, right? So
finish the syllabus.
it's in the chat. So the first, okay, so we're learning now.
Maybe we post it because those that were added late don't have it.
So before the first test, we're learning 105, which is what we're starting with, and then we're going to go back to 91 and 92, right? Because they're going to be similar principles to the principle discussed in 105, and then the next unit's going to be 87, 88, 89, 90, and then 93, 94, right? So it's not necessarily always going to be in order, but it's going to be divided by principles. So we're going to be going back and forth between some of the various different.
So we always have to have the text,
You post that
all of the books with us when we.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it, yeah.
Here.
when you join the later.
You don't get the old things. So I'm going to repost the syllabus. Yeah. Sorry.
In other words, we have to come every week with all of the
No,
materials.
so you'll know in advance looking at the syllabus what we're looking at that week. So you just bring the content for that week. If I think Laman Yimadu posted like a Google Calendar.
Yeah.
That will add. So it'll add to your calendar, knowing you'll know what's coming up that week, every week. Okay. So now let's get to. Are we clear so far? Any questions, comments before we continue? Any questions, comments? No? Clear? All right. So let's begin now with some of the stuff we're going to be learning this week, which is going to be 105, Sif 1 and 2. So it's 105, Halacha, Kufhei, Sif Aleph, and Beis. Yeah. We're starting.
105 is from
It's from Taaruvos.
the Gemara.
Shulchan Aruch. Tur Shulchan Aruch. Yeah. Tur and Shulchan Aruch.
We're starting in Siman 105.
So 105, correct. And this week we're learning 1 and 2, Sif 1 and 2. So it's not a lot of content. It's 1 and 2, Sif Aleph and Beis. Now, I didn't get a chance to discuss what they got with the rabbis from Mal Yimadu, but just I assume they're beginning with this because, as I mentioned before, the principle of the most rudimentary element of this whole kosher question we're going to be discussing is the transfer of flavor, and when flavor transfers and how it transfers. And that's going to be the subject of 105. What types of interactions between one food and another causes what degree of transfer of flavor from one food to another? Yeah. And the two principles we're going to be looking at. Okay, so look, the principle which undergirds this is what's called tam ki'ikr. That's the Hebrew terminology. Tam ki'ikr. Tam ki'ikr means, these words aren't going to even appear in Kofei, but when you learn the introduction to Taaruvos, you're going to see it in there. Tam ki'ikr. Tam ki'ikr means that the flavor itself is like the item itself. Tam, the flavor. Ki'ikr is like the thing itself. So when the flavor of non-kosher meat comes into my bread, it's as if I'm eating the meat itself. So it's biblically non-kosher. It's non-kosher meat. The flavor is transferred to my bread. That bread is now contains the actual meat, even though it's not the meat is gone, but I have the flavor of the meat. Tam ki'ikar, the flavor is like the thing itself. Right? That's the basic principle. Now, as I mentioned, the highest form in which flavor could transfer from one thing to next is via cooking, right? Cooking, there's various different types of cooking, as opposed to roasting, as opposed to grilling. Cooking specifically means within a liquid. It's a stew, essentially, or a soup. When everything's cooked in a soup, in a stew, in a shared liquid, everything shares the flavor of everything. That's why you make a cholent, because you want all the flavors to saturate everything else in the items, in everything else in the pot. Same thing with a soup. You want the flavors to go into everything. So when two things are cooked together, so if you have a non-kosher item cooked with a kosher item, then the kosher item itself becomes completely non-kosher because it's completely saturated with non-kosher flavor. And non-kosher flavor is like the item itself, Tom Kaker. Right? That's the basic principle. Follow clear? Yeah. That's going to be actually Sif Beis. The second Sif, the second paragraph, right? Sif Aleph, Sif Beis, right? Siman means like chapter, and Sif means paragraph. So Siman Kufay, chapter 105, Sif paragraph Aleph and paragraph Beis. So paragraph Beis is going to be about cooking, and it's actually going to be linked to the laws of Shabbos, which I think some of us are very familiar with. In the laws of Shabbos, right? We all make coffee on Shabbos, and how do we do it? We kli shlishi. Why are we doing a kli shlishi? Right? You have the kli rishon, right? Kli means a vessel. Rishon means the first. So the first vessel in which the water was cooked, then you put it into a second one, and then from there you transfer it into the third one where your coffee is. Why are you doing that? Because you don't want to cook on Shabbos. Okay. Then the same principle of cooking that applies to Shabbos, or at least to some degree, is going to apply to kosher as well. So if a non-kosher item and a kosher item are both cooked in a kli rishon, in a first vessel, then it's definitely going to be non-kosher, because the first vessel cooks, all the flavor gets transferred, your food is non-kosher, right? Clear? So you see how already these principles apply across the board in halacha. Principles of Shabbos apply to here. It's a question of, is there bishul? Is there cooking happening? Yeah. What happens at a kli sheni? What happens if I have so let's imagine you have a non-kosher soup, and it's off the fire. Let's just imagine, because you know the laws of Shabbos, and then you heard the principles of flavor transfer. Let's see how we can apply the principles. You have a non-kosher soup. It was just taken off the fire. Yeah? And then I take a kosher piece of meat, and it gets dropped inside. What happens to that kosher piece of meat? What happened to him? Why? Not just because I got missing. Is it a kli sheni? What kli is it?
Oh,
It's a kli rishon. It's still the first vessel. Just like on Shabbos, I took the water off the flame. I still can't put my coffee in there because that would be cooking, right? Because only when I transfer it to the second cup, then I can start doing cooking, right? The principle of cooking applies when you're engaging with the first vessel that was cooked on the flame, right? Following?
Yeah.
You following the principles? You see how these principles start to work? Is everybody clear on this? Yeah? So you have your non-kosher pot of whatever, comes off the flame, you put a kosher piece of meat in it, that kosher piece of meat has now been cooked with non-kosher soup. It's completely, fully non-kosher. No way out of it. Because it was cooked in a kli rishon in the first vessel. What happens if I then take that non-kosher pot of soup, pour it into a bowl, and then the piece of meat falls in? Now we're in a kli sheni territory. Now, does kli sheni have the same level of cooking as kli rishon? The second vessel, does it have the same power of cooking as the first vessel? It does not. To what degree yes, to what degree no? Look out for that in Sif Beis. Following? So these are the principles you're going to be building as you learn. Was this clear? If it's not, please stop me. I don't want to continue if it's not clear. Clear?
Mhm.
Yeah?
Does Batal Bashishi apply in a kli rishon?
Very good. Batal Bashishim always applies, but it's not going to be our principle yet. We're going to come to Batal Bashishim later. But that's a very good point, and I do want to mention that because it's going to be relevant. So remind me at the end of the next thing. I'm going to address that in a second. Yes, very good. Okay, so that's going to be Sif Beis. That's going to be paragraph 2. Sif Beis is going to be discussing the laws of kli rishon and kli sheni and levels of cooking. Another example would be if I give two cases. I put the kosher meat into a non-kosher stew in a kli rishon in the first vessel, or I put the kosher meat into a non-kosher stew when it's been transferred to the second vessel, Klisheni. Those are the two cases I just told you. Yeah. Third case, I took from the Kli Rishon, so it's the first soup, and instead of putting my meat into there, I poured the soup on top of the meat. Does it have the same level of cooking or not? Also something to look out for in Sif Beis. Clear?
Yeah.
That's our intro to Sif Beis. These are the principles to look out for there. The questions of Bishul, what vessel contains what level of cooking capacity, and therefore compelling all the items in that pot to share flavor. If it's of a first vessel, it has the capacity to fully transfer the flavor between everything there. If it's in a second vessel, less degree. If I'm pouring, also less degree. And those are the principles to think about when we go to Sif Beis. Yes, clear?
Only Yovish Balach. In dry and
Okay,
liquid.
we're going to get to those in later Sifim. But for now, we're going to leave it alone.
I thought it's the basics. It started.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. Because for now, we're talking about lach anyway. Right now, we're talking about everything that's wet because it's cooked. The definition of bishul is that it's liquid. So we're talking about liquid. When we get to stuff that don't have liquid, that's when we get to later sif when we talk about roasting and grilling, which doesn't have liquid, and what degree is transfer there. But now we're talking about liquids because that's the definition of bishul. Cooking in halacha means liquid.
Too liquid.
Not necessarily. If you have one liquid and everything inside is inside of a liquid, then they all transfer flavor because they all share the same stew. So you have a potato, piece of meat, and barley, your cholent, they all get shared flavor because they're all in water, right? Even if the thing going in there is a solid, right?
Yeah.
Because the pot is all liquid. That's the definition of bishul. That's cooked with liquid, as opposed to grilling, roasting, frying, which have other degrees of transference because you don't have the same amount of liquid that everything's submerged in. Yeah, is this clear? Okay, that's our intro to Sif Beis. Our intro to Sif Aleph, and you'll see in a second why I'm going backwards, starting from Beis to Aleph. Because Aleph is going to be an awkward type of cooking. And that is pickling. Pickling. When you pickle something, it also has a form of cooking. If you've ever made gravlax, you know this, right? If you take
You're saying like
pickling.
the vinegar, like.
Oh, we'll get that in a second, what you're pickling with. But pickling has the ability also to cause the food to become soft, wet, and emit flavor. And therefore, it also becomes soft, wet, and absorbs flavor. So now, when you're pickling a bunch of things together, they start to share flavors. That's why we make pickles, because you want the pickles to absorb the flavor of the spices or whatever else you're putting in there. Yeah? And the same thing is true if you ever made gravlax, you know this. If you leave the salmon in the pickling for too long, it starts to get white on the outside, as if it's cooking. Right? You ever seen that? Because you're starting to literally cook it in the same process that happens through heat and liquid happens through pickling. So it also has the capacity to give off flavor and absorb flavor, right? So your gravlax is going to taste like the onions and the jalapenos you put in there, and the jalapeno is going to have a fishy flavor. But after how long? In cooking, it'll be much faster. You boil a pot, it'll take much quicker for the flavor to transfer between all the things versus when you're pickling something, right? And then when you're pickling something, what are you pickling in? That'll also tell you how long it's going to take for the flavor to transfer. And we're going to divide it into 3 different types of items that you can pickle in. One is going to be water and juices, non-sharp liquids, so just the water or a juice, and that's going to take 24 hours for flavor transfer. So if you're pickling pickles, it's only going to absorb the flavor of the spices after 24 hours by halachic definition. Before that, it doesn't fully absorb or absorb at all the flavor of the other items in the mixture. If, however, it's being pickled in vinegar, which is a sharper item, it might transfer quicker. If you're pickling in what's called, they translate it in a very funny way over here, and I understand why. In English, it's called brine.
Yes.
Brine is, in the Hebrew term for it is tzir. Brine is essentially a very deeply a very salty liquid. Right? If you have very dense salt water, it's called brine. That's technically, I actually Googled it last night to give me the exact definition of brine. Now, the way they translate it here is liquid that it's been, how they translated it? Here, I'm sorry. They translate it as juice emitted by food through salting. That's how they translate the word. And I get why they're doing that. Because what they're saying is, imagine you took, you line up your salmon on your tray, and you cover the whole thing in salt, right? You wait some time and the salt is now liquidy, right? Not because you added water, but because the salt itself extracted a bunch of the juices from the salmon. And now all of a sudden, all the things that are in that salt mixture start to share flavors. So they call it juice emitted from food through salt. It's a fancy way of saying brine, but they're giving that specific definition because they don't want you to think it's a salt water mixture that you're pouring on top of the salmon. It's more you're putting salt there, and then the salt extracts the flavor. So same thing would be with meat or anything else. Yeah. And that's another level of cooking in which you're extracting flavors from one thing to the next, causing transfer. And that too is going to have definition of how long it takes for the transfer to go from one thing to the next. And that will determine whether something is kosher or not, and to what degree you have to either throw it out because it's not kosher, or maybe only slice off the edge because it didn't go so deep, or maybe only rinse it off because it went even less deep. Clear? So those are going to be our two principles we're looking at this week. The principles of klirishin and klishening, and that's why I did the second first, because the second is just straight up cooking. The first is salting, which is treated like cooking. And that's the principle of kavush, kimavushal. Those are the words you're looking for. Kavush, kimavushal. Kavush means pickled. Mavushal means cooked. So kavush, pickled, is kimavushal, is like it's cooked. So the question is, how much pickling do I have to do till I get to the point that it's cooked? And once I hit the point that it's cooked, now the flavor is completely transferred, and now your item is not kosher. Or the pickling didn't go so far, so only the edge is not kosher. So I just slice off the edge and eat the rest of the steak. Or maybe it didn't even happen at all, just rinse it off, whatever it is. Be clear? Those are the two principles we're looking at this week. Cooking, and then the pickling, which is treated like cooking. Yeah? There'll be other things. Let's make sure I don't miss anything. There are going to be other things that spin off of the question of kavush kamavushal, the question of pickling being treated like cooking. For example, if something let's marinated in a vessel for 24 hours, it was pickled in a jar. Does a jar now absorb the non-kosher flavor? Exactly. What type of material is it, and how long did it sit there for? So if all the flavors inside got cooked because they're sitting for 24 hours and they share all flavors, did that non-kosher shared flavor also absorb into the vessel? And then if I later put something kosher into it, does it then transfer the flavor to the non-kosher, to the kosher item that I put in there? That's also something we have to look out for. Another item you have to look out for is if half the meat half the item is being pickled. So if let's say I put it in a bed of salt, only the bottom half got cured, got pickled, top half didn't. Did the non-kosher flavor now crawl upward to the top half of the fish if it was mixed with non-kosher items? That's also something we have to look out for in section 1. We're clear on this? It sounds like a lot. I know it sounds like a lot.
But the idea of the salt is to remove flavor, not to add flavor.
Okay, so that's a good question. So salting, that's right. That's why they talk about the liquid. Because once salt extracts liquid and the liquid sits there, everything gets pickled in that liquid. So in the same way salt opens the pores to make things go out, it also absorbs too. There is going to be one opinion you're going to come across which indicates that it's either extracting or absorbing, not both. But most seem to are of the view that it makes both happen, that it both absorbs and extracts. Right, because the pores are open. So once the pores are open, it's both emitting juices and taking in juices, sharing flavors. In the same way cooking does that. Cooking opens up the pores of all the foods in there, and they all start to share flavors. So salt will do a similar thing according to most opinions. But look out for that. It's going to be an interesting point. Okay, we clear so far? I know it sounds like a lot, but you'll go through it slowly. You're going to start to see everything. And again, I really recommend taking notes on titles, items. So you have kavush kamavushal. Kavush kamavushal means kavush is pickled, is treated like cooking when? Not treated like cooking if it's less than 24 hours. Treated like cooking if it's salt. Not treated like cooking if it's whatever it is. So you know when the principle applies. And then you're going to get to another principle. Klirishin, the first level of cooking in a liquid. Klishening. And all these titles will have and then they're going to keep on coming back. Because you're going to come to a later siman, some other story is going to come up and they're going to mention in passing because there's a kavush kamavushal. You know, I have my dictionary about kavush kamavushal. I know what applies. I know what to do with it. Right? Is it clear? Okay, final item. Actually, 2 more items to talk about. One is something you mentioned, and one is something we mentioned earlier. The first is like this. I mentioned earlier, it's important to remember this, that we're learning now Taaruvos, we're talking about non-kosher items being mixed with kosher items, which is not the same thing as milk and meat. Because again, milk and meat are kosher items that only become non-kosher when they are in contact with each other, right? And that's going to be very important because biblically speaking, as far as the law of the principle of Torah goes, this is something we're going to get to in Tzaddik Zayin. In our next unit, we'll be more in detail about this, but at least for now, it's good to know this. In as far as the Torah law goes, there's only specific ways in which milk and meat contact become not kosher. We, rabbinically, as a safeguard to the biblical prohibition, prohibit any mixture of milk and meat. But biblically speaking, it's limited to only if it's cooked together. Only if milk and meat is cooked together is it then biblically considered mixture and therefore non-kosher. Because again, milk and meat are kosher itself. It's only when they come in contact with each other. So to what degree of contact does Torah say this is prohibited? So biblically speaking, it's only when it's cooked together. So if you had like in milk and meat touching without cooking, biblically may not be prohibited. It's only rabbinically. And that's really very relevant. Sorry? Exactly. The pasuk says, "Lo tevashel b'di b'chalei v'mor." Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. So Torah prohibits specifically in a manner of cooking. Okay, so now, but this is something that this is how one principle lends itself to the other, right? So we just learned about kovosh k'mavushal, that pickling has the same status of cooking. Does that apply? Is that true biblically? So now, if I pickle milk and meat together, does it get the same biblical prohibition like cooking milk and meat together? Certainly rabbinic, but does it get the same biblical level? Now, who cares if it's biblical or rabbinic? It's prohibited anyway. It makes a big difference. If something is biblically prohibited, I have to throw it out. I can't even give it to my dog to eat. I couldn't sell it.
No benefit.
We cannot have benefit from biblical prohibition of milk and meat. But if it's rabbinic, I could sell it. Can't eat it, but I could sell it. So if my milk and meat were pickled together, not cooked together, can I sell it or not? Right? That's something to look out for as well. And you see how one set of principles applies to another. Because we're learning the law is a mixture of kosher and non-kosher, but then it applies to, okay, how do you apply that to milk and meat together? Because milk and meat isn't kosher and non-kosher, it's kosher and kosher. And how do they become non-kosher? Following? Okay, so I'm just kind of putting out the principles. Final thing. Again, just please, if I'm going too fast and something's not clear, to stop me. Okay, final item to your point. There's a principle which we're going to be learning in later halachas, which is, of course, a huge foundation, is the principle of nullification. The principle of nullification. Now, where does nullification come from? So again, as I kept on repeating, the whole foundation of the prohibitions that we're learning with the halachas of Taaruvos is the question of transfer of flavor. So the principle of nullification basically stands on the fact that the flavor is indiscernible. And if the flavor is indiscernible, then it's not kosher anymore. Because the whole premise of why this piece of meat became not kosher is because it absorbed the flavor of that piece of meat. But if the flavor is negligible, if the flavor is indiscernible, then that flavor doesn't exist, so to speak. Right? So if you're using, okay, look.
Didn't transfer, it's not.
Say again?
It's not discernible, it means it didn't transfer.
Oh, it doesn't exist. Because the problem with the transfer is only because of the flavor it emits. Tam k'iker. The flavor is as if the item itself is there. But if the flavor is nullified, then it's not there. The only reason why this piece of bread that absorbed the flavor of the meat is not kosher is because it has the flavor of the meat. But if it doesn't have the flavor of the meat, then it's not kosher. Because it's only tam k'iker. The flavor is as if the thing itself is there. But if the flavor is not there, then what prohibition is there?
There you gotta taste it.
Tazai. Very good question. How do you know if the flavor is there? You got to taste it to see. And you can't do that, right? Okay, so there are circumstances actually in which the halachas even tell us you can ask a non-Jew to take a sip to see if there's milky flavor, let's just say, in there, in your chicken soup. There is such a thing. And this is where the idea of 60 times comes from. Our sages determined that when something is 60 times nullified, the flavor is no longer discernible. Right? We're not getting to learn those principles now because those principles are going to come later, much more in detail. For example, if it's meat in meat, so two of the same types, one's kosher, one's non-kosher, does it have the same level ratio of nullification? If it were different items, let's say non-kosher fat into a mixture of oil, which is different items, min b'minoi or min shaleh b'minoi, two things that are the same item mixing with each other versus two things that are not of the same item. Is it liquids being mixed in there? Is it a solid being mixed in there? All that will play into this question. But the basic principle is that the halacha determines that the ratio of nullification of flavor is 60-1. That's the basic principle of bittul b'shishim. We clear? Okay, why is that relevant? It's relevant to what we're learning now because we're talking about, let's say, a piece of non-kosher meat falls into your cholent, and because it's cooking, so the flavor is completely fully transferred and everything becomes non-kosher. Only if there's no 60-1 ratio. If that non-kosher piece of meat is nullified by 60,
Same as a big piece of meat.
well, it depends how big the cholent is. Okay, so if you can identify, this will also come up in the principles later, because we're not learning the principles now of bittul, but those principles will come up later. But let's just imagine you could identify the non-kosher piece of meat that fell into the cholent, right? So obviously you're not going to leave that in there, you'll take it out. But what's left behind? Now you take it out, what?
They taste.
The flavor. The flavor that was emitted through the cooking of that non-kosher meat in your kosher cholent is now in there. Okay, do you have 60 times non-kosher, do you have 60 times kosher flavor to the 1%, to 60-1 of the non-kosher flavor?
Probably not. Just
Depends how big your cholent is, and depends how big that piece of meat was, and that will determine whether you have to throw the cholent out or not. Okay. Well, you can. I mean, first of all, it's barely what happens in your kitchen, because again, non-kosher meat doesn't come into your kitchen.
Yeah.
It doesn't come into your kitchen, but these principles are relevant because it's going to become translated to milk and meat also. A little tiny drop of milk falls into your cholent. Is it 60-1?
See, that could happen.
That could happen. Or same thing's going to happen with, let's say, you accidentally mixed your cholent with a dairy spoon. Okay, so what do you have to do then? So how much flavor is there in that dairy spoon? And when was the last time that spoon even absorbed dairy flavor? That's another principle to think about. What's the spoon made out of? And then when I mixed it, how much of that flavor actually made it from the spoon into the cholent? And is it not 60 times the ratio? In most cases, it's going to be at least 6 times the ratio. Plus, we have to even figure out if at all when the last time this spoon even absorbed milk.
Or if it absorbed at all.
Or if it absorbed at all. Exactly. So now you see how once you understand the principles, it starts to become less stressful. Right? What ends up happening is you're going to find out that, this is what I found out when I learned Semicha, is that we're often much more machmer than we were supposed to be. We're much more stringent.
The opposite.
Because you don't know.
I'd be more stressed.
No, but you're going to realize how many principles there are that allow you to understand that if you're keeping a generally kosher kitchen, most of the time it's going to be fine. Most of the questions that come to me, the question is fine in most cases, because of the ratio, because of the last time you used the spoon, because of how hot the thing is. Was there even a transfer? Was it in there long enough to make a transfer? Right? Was the thing big enough to even not be nullified? All of this stuff are going to play in to making the determination that it's fine, it's kosher. But you have to know these principles to be able to understand them and apply them. You see? So even the little principles we're learning today, like your eyes start to open to seeing things a little differently than just, oh my gosh, non-kosher meat touch milk, we gotta throw everything out. Not necessarily. Slow down. Right? Because that's how you feel a lot of times. What? But the house in the mikvah. Yeah. Which is my concluding and final thought that I want to share with you, which is the same way it's important to be stringent when you have to be stringent. It's equally important not to be stringent when you're not supposed to be stringent.
Because then you have Baal Tashkis.
Baal Tashkis, it's a waste of food. It's stressful it's shalom bayis, stressful in the kitchen and the house. A person, and moreover, from a spiritual perspective, if the food is kosher, from the Hasidic perspective, if the food is kosher, then it's meant for you to eat, it's meant for you to make a bracha, and it's meant for you to elevate. And throwing it out because you're too scared and too ignorant, you don't know, and throwing it out it's not fair to the food, not fair to Hashem's energy invested in that food. So in the same way, it's important to be stringent when you're supposed to. It's important not to be stringent when you're not supposed to be stringent. And that's what's going to happen as we learn these halachas and we start to learn these principles. We'll start to see how it's not always just throw things out. There are ways and there are manners and there are times of applying various different principles. Okay, so to review what we have in one sentence, so we can learn it, God willing, over this week. And I'm going to put the polls out, and we'll see either you Again, every day after Shacharis, and then Wednesday, Thursday night, and maybe Shir Friday. I'm gonna post the poll in the group in a second.
Photo.
Oh, photo, yes. So what are the principles we learned? But yeah, Ellie, you have to be in it though.
Aha.
I just have a question because I asked you on Shabbos.
You could
You mentioned coffee and it
Yeah.
increased your power.
Yeah.
So now I asked you on Shabbos about bishul after bishul, and the fact that a lot of the coffee beans that we use are already roasted.
Okay, that's a different story. Yeah. So
Oh.
the aim bishul, we're not learning the laws of Shabbos right now, but there is a principle in bishul bishul, but there yesh bishul achar afia or achar tzli. So it's different. But either way, you still need a kli shlishi for any coffee that you're using. At the bottom line. In terms of the filters, many are lenient in terms of the filter coffee because it's liquid in a solid. It's not studying mixed. We're not learning the laws of Shabbos right now. Okay, if you look at Rabbi Ben Shimon for a moment. Thank you, Elliot. Should appreciate it. Okay, so recap in 1 second. We learned the principle of kavush kamavushal. That is that we treat, right? We learned number one, we learned kavush kamavushal, the law of pickling equals cooking. We learned the idea that cooking is the highest form of transferring one flavor to another. And within pickling, you have different types of pickling. Pickling in salt, pickling in vinegar, or pickling in other juices. And that's going to determine what degree the flavor transfers from one to the next. That's essentially what we learned today in terms of the principles that we're going to be needing for this week's text. Recommendation, summary. First read the summaries, then read beginning with the introduction to the Taaruvos. We're going to get the God willing today. Summaries, then the text, then the visual aid. Okay, so God willing, we'll see everybody either tomorrow after Shacharis, if that's where you're going to be here, or we'll put the polls out Wednesday, Thursday night, or Friday morning for the next year. Sorry?
Does it come with a bigger binder?
Yeah.
Another night for Chavruta?
It's a little-
Not Thursday night?
Binder
no.
seems
So maybe
like-
Monday and Wednesday night. So Monday night for Chavruta and Wednesday night for
There's no
Shir.
more Sundays though, right?
Okay, I'm keeping Sunday, I think. I think Sunday works for
Yeah,
most people.
Sunday, yeah, Sunday.
Sunday, I think I'm working is to stay as an introductory Shir.
Okay.
This similar kind of thing. We're going to go through the principles that we're going to be discussing over the week. And then so maybe we'll do Monday night Chavruta and Wednesday night Shir. If Thursday night doesn't work for Shabbos. So we'll do Monday and Wednesday nights.
When I speak to like a lot of like the people who like need nights, they say like
Thursday night's no good.
Thursday night's not a good night.
Okay, beautiful.
So if you could do sheer, they're not like Thursday nights like not for sheer because if it was Chavruta, they can sometimes cancel other times.
I see.
They can do it their schedule, but
Okay,
for sheer,
So maybe Monday-
it has
so
to be-
Monday and Wednesday. So Wednesday Shir and Monday Chavruta, and then Friday morning, I think I'm going to keep the Shir as well. I'm going to put a poll out. So I think there are some who can't do evenings and only do mornings, so I might keep the Friday Shir as well. So we may have Friday and Wednesday that will be
really
very
putting
similar
yourself
overlap
out.
between Friday and Wednesday. Sorry?
You're really, like, stretching yourself.
There's a group who wants to get it done. I'm happy to invest.
You'll see.
Yeah.
Shulchan right now. Well, we did a lot, like it's been years. ago.
Okay, any questions before we close up?
There's a wonderful app called Otter AI.
Like,
What's that?
It's an app that you can buy, and it records all the shirim that we do all together.
Yeah,
And at the end of it, it gives you all of the overview and points
of those shir.
the shir. It's a
So,
fantastic.
our secretary uses that to create our articles out of classes, some AI
It's
version,
called Otter AI.
something like that, yeah.
It's really,
But
really phenomenal.
the,
because it helps to summarize everything without you having.
There's
to
also the-
On your Lamanya Modu portal, the classes was just recorded, and on the Lamanya Modu portal, you'll have both video version and podcast version,
Okay.
so you can listen to it without
He
in your car, wherever. It's all going to be available on the portal.
Share every single day.
Sorry,
Rabbi does a share they have access. to.
on the portal also you have all kinds of other resources, shiurim,
Rabbi-
and
no, but we're like we're in like an actual
Yeah.
program.
there's a Rabbi Barber does a class every day. His
Every
classes.
single day.
His class can replace a chavruta in a way because he
Yes.
goes through line by line.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a class that replaces chavruta, right, Barber's class will do it online. But I prefer, but it's just being straight up. What's the word?
It's not about that. It's like more like
Not
it's
full
more
disclosure.
Like you're on vacation.
Yeah.
It's bad week
But
for
full
you,
disclosure,
whatever,
I do-
You can't like your chalusa. You can catch up by just watching the shear, and that's why it's there for you to catch up as a catch up mechanism.
But also full disclosure, I would definitely prefer that chavruta happens at some point that I'm here, either in the mornings after davening or Monday and Wednesday evening, for the very simple reason that when you're learning in a group, so we all feel like we're learning together, and then we discuss it together. I can answer questions, and you hear someone else asking the question. Oh, that's something interesting, and it becomes like if you ever learned in a bit medrash, that's the energy in a bit medrash. Where everybody's learning the same topic at the same time. You end up having this It was in yesterday's Pirkei Avos, right? One of the ways in which Torah is acquired is through is to pull what's the expression? Tibuk Chaverim, and through like group learning, it's a very big part of the learning process. So I definitely recommend and encourage everybody to be here when we're here doing it all together, either right after davening in the morning or Monday and Wednesday evening. Now we're all learning together in the same. The energy of learning together
Cooking
adds.
in the pot together.
Sorry,
We're
we're cooking in the pot together. Very, very good. Exactly, and the flavor is transferred between one to the other.
My question
That's the
is,
idea.
who's setting up the chavrutas? Because if half the group wants to do the evenings and the other half wants to do the floor, then we're limited to who's gonna do a chavruta in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm in for the morning.
For the morning, okay.
Whoever else wants to be involved in the morning, then we can figure.
No,
out
I think you already have a chavruta, right?
Yeah.
You sure you also have a chavruta? You have a chavruta,
I
Binyamin?
feel like he's saying that based on who's here, you know?
Yeah,
Yes. Are you here in the mornings at davening?
Yeah,
I'm
but
not sure yet.
but I'm learning with Ben.
Oh, you're learning with Ben.
I'm learning with Ben.
Oh, I thought you were learning with Aaron.
No.
Talk to Aaron Spiro.
No, Aaron Spears with Jordan Gross.
Oh, he's with Shlomo, right? He's
Yeah,
also right.
Shlomo-
Okay, he can't do mornings, right?
Yeah,
He's
Shlomo
doing
and Aaron
evening.
together.
Evening. Okay, so see, put in the group. I'll put in the group. We'll see who's doing mornings,
What time?
and then he'll find the.
What time's morning?
Aaron Spiro and I are gonna be coming to the evening shares.
Okay, so that's Monday and Wednesday, God willing.
Monday, Wednesday, but we're also gonna be doing our own chavrusa time on our own.
Okay.
But Monday, Wednesday, at least then we'll have the shir.
Okay, good, very good.
There's evening shares on.
That's a good question. What time?
I
Monday
think you said
evening, but I
8
think 8 p.m. is gonna
Yeah.
is a good time. It's
Okay.
not too late.
9 the shir.
Does
But
Rosa have to be two?
sorry,
2 people?
you have 3 people together. Sometimes that works out. You can have 3. That could happen. Sorry, you have Elijah, don't you?
So what
But
time is
I-
morning usually?
So morning is davening is 7 o'clock,
Okay.
and then after davening, the best time for me is between 8 and 9.
Mhm.
From 9 o'clock till 12, I have like my own learning going on. I'm here anyway, so you can still interrupt me to ask me questions. But between 8 and 9, I'm mamish available, sitting or answer questions, be available. So I spoke. The Gemara share is going to still be going, but I'm happy to interrupt and answer questions during the Gemara share. Which is that it's only the second half an hour.
What's happening tomorrow? Davening?
So tomorrow davening is at 9. Good question. So at 10 o'clock, I'm here. Everybody's here. 10 o'clock, I'm here. Okay, Yidden. Have a wonderful day. I'm very, very excited. And Lo yahabai shan lo moed, the one who's embarrassed doesn't learn.
Mhm.
There's 2 phrases. The one who's embarrassed doesn't learn, and the one who is it's a good question. I actually want to make a place. I do want to make a place that we can keep their booklets here, so we have to carry them back and forth.
The ones we're working on. The rest we just keep.
That's right. So for now, just keep 105.
Yeah.
For now, keep 105. Everything else you can put away. You take home 105. Keep.
I'm gonna get my house though.
So what does he say? Oh, lo yahabai shan lo moed. The one who's embarrassed cannot learn, and the one who's lo yakapta malamed, the one who is too stringent can't be a good teacher. So I'm going to try my best not to be too stringent, but you do your part. Try not to be too embarrassed. If you have a question and you're not sure, as terminology, take a picture of the terminology in the booklet, post it in the group, and say, "Ask Rabbi, what is the meaning of this word?" And I'll post a voice note, and you'll be surprised others may want an answer just like you do. So don't be
Yes,
embarrassed.
please everyone ask your questions on the group.
Ask your questions on the group so everybody can see everybody else's things, and I'll try my best to be as generous as I can with answering questions in a timely fashion. A wonderful day. I'm very, very excited about this initiative.
Good day, Rabbi Levi.
Yeah.
Are you around MTC today or no?
I'm in and out. Text me.
Okay, fine, because I just want to come pick up the books and have you show me what's going on.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Fine. That's why it's a year. It's a week.
Good day, Eden.